We're really living in pretty interesting times. We see the changes going on all around us, and the world is getting smaller, and churches themselves are beginning to see that they need to move and change to enter into this new way that people have of living in the world. We're doing different things. We're experiencing technology like we've never seen before. And so it's much like the days of Jesus when there was a powerful reformation in the world. People began to think differently about things, see things differently. But you need to hold on to the core of the faith. And I want to ask somebody here to share with us the mission statement of Trinity United Church of Christ.
Embracing and celebrating God's love.
All right, embracing and celebrating God's love. Let's all say that together. Embracing and celebrating God's love. Now, what passage could be better to reflect that mission statement than this story about the woman who entered this chamber with an alabaster jar and anointed Jesus' feet, and because of the religious convictions of the day, she should have been there. She wasn't allowed. It was scandalous for this woman to enter in. So we have these two models of two different people who think differently about spirituality, Jesus and Simon. And we have also these people who think differently about what it means to be a person of faith, Simon and this woman. And it's a contrast for us. Now, we don't know how important it is to sit around tables, right? Oh man, how many images are there on the internet like that? Huh? We love those family shots like that. And I heard this story about a little boy, much like the one in the picture here, who during dinner said, "Dad, are bugs good to eat?" And his father said, "Son, let's not talk about that kind of thing at the dinner table." So the boy was quiet. So after dinner, the father's reclining in his chair and watching TV together, and the game is on. And he says, "Hey, son, what did you want to ask me?" And the boy said, "Oh, nothing. There was a bug in your soup, but it's gone now." We all know about hospitality around the dinner table, don't we? Because we live it. And we all have different rules, and the people of Israel had their rules about the dinner table. Now, one point that I want to make about this story is I want to remind you about how we practice communion in the United Church of Christ and how we practice communion here. I always try to say at some point in liturgy that we see this table as a sign of the long line of public meals that Jesus shared during his ministry. Remember what And somehow we have to live into that spirit of Jesus that advocates for people who are on the margin, that advocates for inclusion of all people in the life of the common life of the table. And it's sad that Simon's story is too often also been the church's story. And that's why we always need to reform. That's why things change, because you reach a breaking point. People realize this doesn't really seem right that these things are happening. So, in the Gospels, Jesus asks over 300 questions. And he only ever answers 8. That's the life of the Spirit, isn't it? We live for questions. That's the name for our adult Sunday school group. We live for questions. This is a great question that Jesus asks Simon today. He says, do you see this woman? And I think the emphasis is on see. Do you see this woman? And if we were to do a paraphrase, we could say, do you even see this woman? Now there's separation. She's not included. There's something wrong. Martin Luther King said the worst thing that can happen to a person is that they become invisible. And yet we all know what happens in our world. And so Jesus says something to the effect, look into your heart, Simon. Can't you see yourself in this woman? What kinds of things does God call us to be about, to live into that new world of Jesus and away from that old world of Simon? What kinds of things do we have to do? Today, one of the great things when we have alternative worship in the PowerPoint is that I can go way back to the Evangelical Reformed hymnal, and I can pull some of those out that didn't get into the New Century hymnal. And today, when we close, we have that great hymn, The Voice of God is Calling. And there's a line in that I really love. It says, from ease and plenty save us, from pride of place absolve. Isn't that a powerful line? We don't think about needing to be saved from ease and plenty. We think that's the meaning of life. But it's a spiritual difficulty. It's an obstacle to including everyone. Today, this last week, someone sent this to me on Facebook. You know, everything's about zombies these days. What's the point of being afraid of zombie apocalypse when we already a zombie? Are we a zombie? Are we unaware? We don't look toward our heart and consider the things that we ought to be doing. And we just go through the motions. Are we a Frankenstein, which also I want to remind you was a social and political commentary this time? Are we sleeping through a revolution? Are we sleeping through times when God's movement of the Spirit wants to move through us, to welcome, to embrace, as this moment to celebrate? Are there times when that Spirit moves us and we're a zombie? Are there times when we're distracted by ease and plenty and don't do the things that really have meaning in life? It's dead. And so many places religion is dead because we've been Simon and not Jesus. So what I think that Jesus is doing here is something that when people live in abusive relationships, or when they're on a job where they're always criticized, there's something in counseling that's called changing the channel. You know, you just pretend you have a radio there and you turn the criticism channel off. You guys probably already do this, you know, with your spouses and your kids. I mean, you know how to turn the dial on the radio, but think about what constant criticism does to you. Think about your inner critic, and also think about his outer critic. And Jesus changes the channel on Simon. Think of it this way. Simon, can you turn down the harsh voice of criticism in your head? I'm not going to listen to the condemnation channel. Being Spirit-led rather than law-led or institution moved by the Spirit.